Let's move on to public safety. Last year, I was interviewing a man who was the former CEO of Amtrak, and we were discussing ground transportation and uh, dangers, safety, all of the issues with ground transportation. He told me how when he was CEO of Amtrak, there was a bad accident. People were killed. He assembled his best team of senior folks, pulled them together, and they discussed what they could do, what were their principles, what did they even stand for if this had happened, and how could they fix it. And he listened to them for about 30 minutes, and then he stood up and said, "We do not kill our customers. That's it." And I loved that because it really sums it up. And can't we ask that of our cities and roads? We do not kill our taxpayers. We do not kill the people who live here. That should be stronger than any desire to make a route that much faster or that much easier for people to drive. We really have to not be killing people. I'm going to share with you an important chart. This represents the top 10 causes of injury deaths by age group in the United States. And let me show you how to read this. On the left side, 1 through 10, you will see the left, the number 1 means the number 1 cause of death for the age group that is, across the top, less than 1 year old. So across the top are age cohorts, and on the side are rankings. So an example would be for, let's take ages 1 to 4. The number 1 cause of death, I should say not cause of death, cause of injury death is drowning. The number 2 cause is what they call motor vehicle traffic, basically roadway death. And they even separate that out here from pedestrian. So the number 2 cause of death for children ages 1 to 4 is traffic deaths. And the number 5 cause is being a pedestrian and getting hit by a car. If you look across the entire age spectrum, what you will see is for ages 5 to 9, 10 to 14, 15 to 24, the number 1 cause of injury death is motor vehicle traffic. And for all ages 25 and above, the number 1 cause of injury death is motor vehicle traffic. And it is the number 2 cause, ages 1 to 4. And the 4th cause, ages less than 1, where suffocation, homicide are also factors. So what you can learn from this chart is that we are accepting a very high number of deaths that are injury deaths by cars that we have, and if you look at the history, it's very much the same. We've accepted this for a very long time. But how do you fix it, and how do you put a cost to it? You can estimate that each person whose life is saved is worth $1 million, if you want to just attach numbers to it. For some purposes, the federal government estimates that a life that includes specialized training, say as a pilot, a military pilot, might be valued at $10 million. So somewhere between 1 million and 10 million in general. How do you assess the life of someone whose life is inexorably altered, life-altering injury, brain injury, or some other injury that truly affects how they can live their life, their quality of life for the rest of it, whatever is left. And you can estimate that in the range of $500,000. So People might quibble with those numbers. Feel free. I would have no problem explaining them to people. But I think they represent an approach that is supportable, so that if you're able to take 20% of the of traffic off the road and put it into Vision Zero safe infrastructure, then you will save some proportion of those lives. You can calculate that for yourself. Let's turn quickly to the third impact, more affordable housing. There's a fascinating group out in San Francisco led by a woman named Sonia Trauss called Yes in My Backyard. And these are people who are trying to shift the paradigm for how we think about housing, from thinking of people who fight denser housing to be stewards of the environment or stewards of their neighborhood, and to think instead of them of people who are selfish hoarders who want to prevent other people from being able to have a quality of life at all. It's just fascinating. Agree with it or not, what is important here is that micromobility changes the requirements for housing and changes the impacts of new affordable housing. Affordable housing has assumed, by and large, that it has to include in cities, in so many cities, parking, and that it will have an impact on traffic. And micromobility changes this. If someone is instead moving into housing that is dense, that abuts, say, a very nice neighborhood, they in all likelihood will not be driving a conventional car, and certainly not through that neighborhood. The way things are now, a person on that kind of a budget, and if micromobility is available, and especially if there's some way to connect with public transit, the impact of traffic on that neighborhood will be minimal. It's not an argument. It is mitigated. The argument is deeply mitigated by providing low emission, low cost, safe alternatives with an infrastructure that goes with it. And in fact, there's a very strong case to be made that the people who would be protesting from that neighborhood against the housing would actually benefit from connecting to the lean infrastructure. So what this means is the enormous amount of land in our cities that is dedicated to cars can be released. A lot of it can be released. In San Francisco, for example, there are 440,000 car parking places and places in garages, and that does not include private homes. So there's that much of the city is dedicated to parking cars. It is estimated the total land area dedicated to cars there is on the order of 20 to 25% of that entire city, with roads, cars, parking, and so on. What if some of that parking could be turned into parks? What if some of that massive parking lots, could be turned into sites for affordable housing with micromobility as the way to connect? When we start thinking about our cities in that way, we realize how much of our cities we simply take for granted are presumed to be consumed. So for example, in San Francisco again, the number of cars, if laid end to end and block after block, would consume 2 of New York City's central parks. Take Central Park times 2, and that's how much we've devoted to parking in San Francisco. Think of her what you will. I am cheering on Sonia Trauss because we need to do something. Housing is unaffordable. People are making ridiculously long commutes. Often those commutes have bad environmental consequences in terms of dirty air, noxious emissions. We need to think differently, and we need to think empathetically and inclusively. We need to think with some understanding of what people can afford, and with the thought that everyone is entitled to a decent quality of life. Before we leave this section, I want to touch as well on the public health aspect of air quality. So the fourth factor, after affordable housing and its cascading impacts, is health impacts of air quality. And by this, we're referring to the noxious emissions and that can aggravate lung conditions, can aggravate people with asthma, all kinds of conditions, lung damage that are affected. In addition, air quality counts against a city with the Environmental Protection Agency. If there is too much air quality, there have to be limits on adding new industry. And that's what so many cities are experiencing. There are many cities right now whose air quality is so dangerous, so deadly, that it is simply unsafe for people even to live there. But think of what happened when the pandemic shutdown took effect across America. Cities, including mine, including LA, for the first time in years, got a glimpse at their city skyline without smog. Cars were off the road. Two terrible economic effects, but to providing a great understanding to us about what is possible. What is air quality costing us? And of course, there are many aspects of public health that are impacted by single occupant cars and internal combustion engines and high speeds, and public safety is intertwined with public health. But here you have an actual cause that is costing people years off their life, and it's breathing the air in our cities. We can do better.